So Song of Songs is kind of known for being one of the saucier or racier, books in the Bible, and there certainly are parts, but that's really not all of it. So let's go ahead and jump into this subject together, shall we? When a man and a woman decide that they want to have a baby, I'm just kidding. Although there's probably at least one person who's like, so close. Here's the thing, relationally, most people do not begin relationships by asking the deep questions about wisdom and timing or their character or what it would be like to enter into a covenant with somebody. You hear things like, are they husband material or wife material? Usually relationships begin with attraction. So tonight, it's all about love that awakens. It's about the beginning, but there is something here for everybody regardless of your station in life. For most people, if there's chemistry or there's excitement or there's curiosity or an emotional connection, we start to feel confident. And that part of love feels natural to us because attraction itself is not unnatural. In fact, Song of Songs opens immediately with desire on full display. We'll get there in just a moment. Tonight is all about what you do when attraction or desire wakes up. For a lot of people, we've grown up with two unhealthy extremes, normally one or the other, and we'll review this again in a moment. But for some people, it's like they can't not be alone, and they're constantly feeling like they have to fill this void. And then for other people, the issue is they almost feel shameful every time that there is 1 second of attraction or draw to somebody or something. But you should know, just in case this gives you some freedom, it is natural to be attracted to beauty. Now, what's beauty? That's different depending on who you talk to. It is unnatural to look at beauty and decide to use it for self. Does that make sense? What's the saying about art? Art is in the eye of the beholder, right? You could have a piece of art that sells for millions of dollars and you could look at it and say, I think it's a blank piece of paper. And they'd say, no, it's a rabbit in a snowstorm. But it's the same thing when it comes to what attracts you or draws you. The balance of this, of trying to find the happy medium, attraction is a gift. It shows you things that you're drawn to, but what you do with it matters, is something that is very important for all believers. Here's why love matters so much. And one of the things that you're going to hear frequently throughout this 6-part study is that we should not awaken love until the time is right. Why does that matter so much? Because awakened love changes people. You ever have a friend, and once they got into a relationship, you thought, they're not the same. In the Hebrew, they would say, duh. Relationships, they change people. Are you the same after you got into a relationship? And if you are, we do counseling. Awakened love changes people. It affects your emotions and your priorities and your desires and your decisions, and it affects your whole identity. Love has the ability to change the direction of somebody's life for the good or the harm, depending on how it is approached. And I said this in the pre-reading if you got this in your email, but Song of Songs traditionally was treated as a sacred and very mature text by the Jewish people. They were not allowed to read it until they had achieved adulthood. And you may think, well, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, when they were 13, they were considered a man or a woman. Yeah, for some of them they didn't allow, some cultures there would not allow people to read it until they were somewhere around the age of 30. Now listen, they understood that once this was studied, it would be better understood when you had some life experience under your belt. But the perspective that they have here, that relationships are so important and they change you, is vital, and it's something that Jesus echoed. And so I just want to read you a brief scripture. It's not in your notes, but it's from the lips of Jesus. If you need to fill in the blank notes, we have them at those 2 tables right there by the door, and we'll start them shortly. But here's what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. He says, "You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery. But I say, anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." In other words, he's saying, yeah, don't do it, but here's how you stop from ever even getting to the place that you could do it. He goes on to say this, gentle Jesus who leaves the 99 to find the one. He says, so if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your strong hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It's better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Jesus was not lowering the value of love or relationships, and in case anybody is wondering, this was not a literal command. Oh man, I can't believe I did that. Time to get rid of the I. A love worth desiring. This is Solomon's Song of Songs, more wonderful than any other. You ready? Kiss me and kiss me again, for your love is sweeter than wine. How pleasing is your fragrance. Your name is like the spreading fragrance of scented oils. No wonder all the young women love you. Take me with you, come let's run. The king has brought me into his bedroom. How happy we are for you, O king. We praise your love even more than wine. Now, in case you're worried that the inner middle schooler in you is going to giggle every time I read a scripture, I'm not going to read every single scripture, but some of them you really need to hear. There is no slow introduction in this book with the theme of love, okay? There's no careful setup. They are not worried about how they're writing this. They're not worried somebody's going to say, oh, that's a little inappropriate. This book begins with desire immediately. After saying it's like the greatest song that Solomon's ever written, it says, kiss me and kiss me again. So immediately you are pulled into this relationship that is filled with affection and longing and pursuit that tells us something right away, and it's important for us to understand this, even if we're uncomfortable with it. Scripture is not uncomfortable acknowledging human desire. Scripture is not uncomfortable acknowledging human desire. And the very first verse that I just kind of skipped over also reminds us it is Solomon's Song of Songs. Depending on the translation of the Bible you read, sometimes it's listed as Song of Songs, sometimes it's listed as Song of Solomon. Well, it's Solomon's Song of Songs. In the same way that Jesus is listed as the King of Kings, in other words, there's not a greater king than this king, Solomon is saying out of all the songs he's written, this is the one. This is the best one. So that phrase means the greatest song. It means the greatest song. It's the finest among many. And so, as I was saying, that phrase, kiss me there, carries more depth than it first appears. It's not just, hey, do you want to make out? In Hebrew culture, as I'm sure many of us know, a kiss represented a lot of different things. It could represent affection or honor or loyalty or intimacy, depending on the context. If you've ever been reading through the New Testament and it says, greet one another with a holy kiss, and you're like, well, we don't do every tradition today at church. But in the context here, the language clearly communicates it is romantic desire. That's your blank there. It is romantic desire. What is important is not simply the physical expression of this romantic desire, but the openness behind it. So the relationship that's going to be described throughout this book begins with honesty rather than any sort of competition. There are no secrets in this relationship, and that's something we'll talk about in a few minutes. This woman continues by saying that your love is sweeter than wine. And the Hebrew word that's translated love there is dodim. It's dodim. It's a word that's connected to affection or physical love. This would have not been a word used in their culture for any other kind of love other than physical love, intimacy, and relational delight. But when comparing to wine throughout Scripture was always associated with like joy or celebration or abundance or like a shared fellowship. It was something that brought people together. Wine was not normally present for somebody drinking alone in the ancient days that this was written. It was always for gathering and bonding together. So in other words, she's saying that this relationship carries a kind of joy and delight that surpasses temporary pleasures. I want you to think about this. Culture teaches people to pursue excitement without ever asking if the relationship itself is healthy. And when that happens, chemistry, like we talked about earlier, becomes the foundation, and people's feelings become the authority they go by. And Song of Songs immediately begins by connecting desire to something deeper than physical appearance alone. And here's what it is. I'll never read this book the same. Next, it says, how fragrant your cologne or your perfume, your name is like it's spreading fragrance. So the word that's translated as fragrant comes from the Hebrew word reach. Reach. It means an aroma, a scent, or a fragrance, just like you would think, but it has a deeper meaning. So in the ancient world, fragrance was valuable because it lingered. Nobody had signature scents. We've all got a cologne or a perfume that we prefer, but that just was not a thing back then. There wasn't even an Axe body spray. So any kind of fragrance you were gonna put on you was gonna cost you something. And because of that, it had to be very pungent. It had to be something that would stay behind when you left. And that's what she says. The perfumed oil was expensive and precious. So catch this. What grabs your attention the most here is not the appearance, it's his name. The Hebrew word shem, it translates as name. It carries more meaning than just like an identifier. In the Hebrew thought, somebody's name represented their reputation, it represented their character, their identity, and the kind of person that they truly were. So when she says that his name is like fragrance poured out, she's saying that there is something about his character that attracts people toward him. His reputation precedes him, and when he leaves, it lingers. She's saying that his integrity leaves an impression behind him like the same way a fragrance in a room does. So this is not just, hey, I'm hot for you or whatever. This is somebody with an actual attachment. That's what it's trying to convey there. And that shifts the whole conversation about attraction for the rest of this chapter. A relationship can begin with physical beauty or emotional chemistry, but healthy love never survives on attraction alone. Eventually, the character or the integrity, they come into play, and I think we'd all agree that matters. So that also becomes important in a world where people are taught to prioritize that chemistry or attraction before character. What is the old advertising slogan? It's sex that sells. And that's why sometimes you're like, what am I watching? Why is this on a commercial for cat food or whatever it is? They want what they think is going to seem appealing or attractive to you, because if they can catch your eye long enough to hear what they're saying, then they'll try to catch your wallet. So it's a method that is older than any of us. Fragrance, though, remember this, fragrance fades if there's no substance beneath it. So as much as we all hate when somebody douses themselves with 3 bottles of Axe, Axe does not last as long as a lot of the more important colognes and perfumes. So the woman says, come on, take me with you, let's run. Love moves towards connection intentionally. This is where you start to see a little bit of pursuit and the desire to get closer. But even here, this is important, hear me on this. Their love is not isolated from the community. Listen, how happy we are for you, O King. We praise your love even more than wine. That's at the end of it. Other voices appear in the song, and they purposely appear in the song that was written because they're affirming what they see. Why does that matter today? Well, it matters because as much as we don't like people in our business, healthy relationships do not only look good in private. They carry integrity publicly as well. Love that is built wisely can withstand being seen clearly. Truth is never afraid to be seen. One of the dangers of unhealthy love is that it often survives only, and here's a couple blanks for you. One of the dangers of unhealthy love is that it often survives only in secrecy or fantasy or isolation. Secrecy, fantasy, or isolation. But all throughout Scripture, wisdom is consistently pulling relationships into honesty and accountability and integrity instead of being hidden. Real love of any sort has nothing to hide. So renewing our minds in this Bible study means that we learn that desire itself is not the enemy. God created affection and attraction in all of it. But when your desire is disconnected from wisdom, it's dangerous really fast. I didn't read a lot of the personal insight questions before, but I'm just going to go through them quickly in tonight's session. These are just for you. These are not things that get discussed at the table, but in case it's helpful for you, what qualities have I been taught to value most in relationships, and do those priorities reflect wisdom or only attraction? Ask yourself a hard question there. And the second one is, what kind of fragrance does my life leave behind through my character, my reputation, or the way that I treat others? Second section, it's called Dark But Lovely. Dark but lovely. Well, Song of Solomon, the verses 5 through 8, it says this. This woman says, I am dark but beautiful. Says, O women of Jerusalem, dark as the tents of Kedar, dark as the curtains of Solomon's tents. Don't stare at me because I'm dark. The sun has darkened my skin. Now, as soon as the relationship begins to unfold, the tone here shifts from all of this open passion and openness to admiration and vulnerability. I never read this until I started doing a deeper study and understood that she is purposely being vulnerable in these verses. The woman who spoke so boldly about desire and affection a few verses ago is now speaking about her insecurity. She's talking about comparison and how she sees herself. And that's important because attraction might awaken love quickly, but intimacy eventually exposes the places where people feel the most vulnerable, where they feel vulnerable. Because she says, I'm dark but beautiful, or dark but lovely, depending on your translation. Both ideas carry the same issue. She's communicating that she knows she looks different than what others may expect. She says, my brothers were angry with me and they made me go work out in the field, so I'm darker than most of the girls like me, but because I had to work in the vineyard for the family, I could never tend to my own vineyard. And we'll get to that in a moment. She is self-conscious. She's saying that her skin is darkened by being out there, and she's saying, don't stare at me because I'm dark. In other words, she already feels the weight of comparison before anyone else says a word. And we're talking about what love awakens. That word that is translated as beautiful or lovely, it comes from the Hebrew word navah, and it means beautiful, fitting, pleasing, or worthy of admiration. Worthy of admiration. What makes this pretty powerful when you think about it is she speaks both realities at once. And I'll speak a little extra to the ladies here because this seems to be something I hear from y'all as a struggle more than the guys, but she is acknowledging what she believes other people might judge about her while also still declaring that she possesses value and beauty. In the same sentence, I am dark, but I'm beautiful. Don't judge me because of this. I am still lovely. And so exposing those insecurities is something that's important to her because she's building a healthy relationship. And it naturally puts us in a position of vulnerability when we do that. It puts us in a position of vulnerability. When those insecurities get exposed, it reminds us that to be known on a deeper level is also to risk rejection on a deeper level. Now, this is why a lot of times when people get into a relationship, they don't like to go deep. They don't want to have the deep talks because if they do, they might get rejected for who they really are. It's a lot easier to be rejected for what you represent or what you project or put out there than it is to be rejected for who you actually are. That woman explains that her brothers forced her to work in the vineyards, and in the process, she neglected, her quote is, my own vineyard. And the word kerem, there meaning vineyard, becomes symbolic. It becomes symbolic throughout Song of Songs. Because vineyards represented fruitfulness. If you've ever had a vineyard or you've seen them, then you understand they require a lot of care and investment. You have to tend to the ground. You have to put the seeds in. You have to water. You have to make sure that, pests don't get in. So here we can see that the vineyard actually reflects her own life and her own condition. What she's actually saying is she has spent so much time laboring for others that she feels like she has neglected herself. She's neglected herself. So that reality kind of reaches a little bit deeper than physical appearance, doesn't it? I don't know if there's anybody here that knows what it feels like, but a lot of people know what it feels like to pour into your responsibilities and expectations and your work and family pressures or even ministry or the needs of others while also neglecting your own emotional and spiritual health. That's basically what she's saying. Her own emotional and spiritual health. It is possible, I hope this is a good warning to somebody, it's possible to appear productive externally while internally feeling exhausted, unseen, or disconnected from your own worth. But what's really beautiful here is the man doesn't respond by criticizing her insecurity or dismissing her vulnerability there. The relationship continues moving towards reassurance, and that's because healthy love does not weaponize vulnerability. It does not weaponize vulnerability. It creates safety for honesty. And for us in our relationships, anytime somebody says something to you that they're worried about or anxious about, anytime we laugh at them or make fun of them for it or make light of it or trivialize it, they're gonna think 2 or 3 times before they ever bring up an insecurity to you again. And all of a sudden, before you know it, now there's division, now there's some distance, okay? Then this woman asks where he takes his flock to graze and rest at midday because she does not want to wander aimlessly among the flocks of his companions. You know what it means when she asks about his flock grazing? It's talking about his flock and where they eat their food. Guys, get your mind out of the gutter. So beneath the surface, though, this is not just about location, it's about direction and belonging. She wants to know if she would be accepted, if she could accompany him. Where do you take your flock? Because I have to take my flock somewhere, and maybe we're going to the same place. She wants confidence that she's moving towards the right person instead of wandering into confusion. And that word that's translated as wander is something that obviously carries the idea of drifting or roaming without a clear direction. But is that not modern right there? I mean, how many people move through relationships emotionally wandering and hoping to stumble into love, but they're not praying or seeking wisdom or discernment in it? So the response she gets is pretty clear. The man says this, he says, if you don't know, O most beautiful woman, follow the trail. Well, sounds like he's into it. He's picking up what she just threw down, right? Notice the affirmation there. Even in her insecurity, she is still called beautiful by him. And her vulnerability doesn't reduce her value to him. And that reminds us that one of the greatest threats to healthy love, this is good for all of us, one of the greatest threats to healthy love is unresolved insecurity. Unresolved insecurity. And here's why. Insecurity can cause people to settle for unhealthy relationships. It can cause them to seek validation from the wrong places. It can sabotage healthy connections, and it can make them constantly question their own worth. When identities unstable, relationships become attempts to gain worth instead of expressions of the worth they already have. So a couple insight questions. What areas of our lives do insecurity or comparison most often shape the way you see yourself or others? And secondly, are you looking to relationships to give you identity, or are you allowing God to shape your identity first? It's an important question. Relationships, it's impossible not to have them attached to your identity in some form. If you're a parent, if you're a spouse, you get this. It's part of your identity. It can't be central. Verses 9 through 17, this is called the power of honor. If you attend on Sundays, we talked about honor just a couple of weeks ago. And all of this back and forth is them honoring each other. As I look at this, I can see that the man is continuing to speak here. He says, "You are as exciting, my darling, as a mare among Pharaoh's stallions." This is one of my favorite things when we look at biblical compliments. Have you ever seen where people will print this now on coffee mugs and shirts, and they're like, "Baby, your hair is like a flock of goats," right? And I get it, like it's funny by today's standards, but all of this is very intentional. He says, "How lovely are your cheeks, your earrings, set them afire." Try that with your wife later, guys. He says, "How lovely is your neck, enhanced by a string of jewels. We will make for you earrings of gold and beads of silver." The woman says, "The king is lying on his couch, enchanted by the fragrance of my perfume." So here it comes, right? And so they go back and forth. So listen to this. How they speak to each other is completely honoring. It is completely honoring. He's not just saying how beautiful she is. He's saying, you deserve a necklace on that neck. He's saying your earrings bring out the natural beauty of you, of your cheeks. When he's talking about the mare, that's important, and I'll get to that in a second. But I want you to understand that the relationship that they have is also built through words. Compliments are spoken. Value is expressed from one to the other, and they're both not assuming that the other one knows how they feel. It's communicated to each other. My pastor told me about a story, I don't know who it was, that he talked to somebody one time and they said, "Well, I told her I loved her on the day we got married, and if I ever changed, I'd tell her." I don't know if anybody's ever actually said that or not, but that's awful. If you said that, go say you're sorry. They need to know it. Don't build them into somebody who has to come back to you over and over again and say, "Do you still love me? I can't tell. What do you still think of me?" The man starts by saying, "You are as exciting as a mare among Pharaoh's stallions." And at first glance, that does sound like an unusual compliment. But in the ancient world, Pharaoh's horses represented beauty, and they were also very rare and very valuable. It wasn't just a wild horse. He's not like, "Y'all see those horses down at the beach? You're like one of them." He's saying this rare and valuable prize that the average person could not afford to have in their life. You are rare and valuable. This is what he's trying to communicate to her. And the point is not merely physical beauty. The point is that she stands out. And the word that's translated as darling there comes from a Hebrew word, rayah. Rayah means companion or beloved or close friend. Close friend. So when he says darling, it's not even romantic exclusively. And that makes sense when you think about it, because we call kids darling sometimes, right? That's important because even in the romantic language of Song of Songs, love is not reduced to physical attraction at any point in this book. Inside of the affection is companionship. Real love is not built just by desire. It has to be strengthened through your friendship and your closeness with one another and trusting each other. So the man continues describing her cheeks, the jewelry, her neck with strings of jewels. In the ancient Hebrew culture, by the way, the neck and the neckline symbolize dignity and strength of character. So he's also saying that you have high esteem and value in addition to your beauty. That's one of the defining characteristics also of healthy love. It speaks life instead of constantly tearing someone down for some sort of relational authority structure. I think a lot of times in modern relationships, we get into arguments because we say, when you do this, you make me feel like you don't care about me. But if our entire filter was, am I making you feel loved? And their entire filter was, am I making you feel loved? Guess who's feeling loved? both of you. And so the book of Proverbs says that the power of life and death is in the tongue, and Song of Songs shows us what it looks like when it's used to heal rather than to wound. So a lot of people carry scars from relationships where words became weapons instead of gifts to them. Things like criticism or silence or manipulation, comparison, or just constant negativity, they all erode connection over time. I want you to know, one of the fastest ways to drain health from a relationship is to make honor rare and criticism constant. Is when you make honor rare and criticism constant. I want you to think about this. I've heard somebody say, well, I don't want to compliment her too much because then it won't mean anything when I do compliment her. And I went, let me know how that works. Because what he was trying to say was, I'm doing this for her. I don't think you are. The woman responds by describing the king's presence like perfume resting close to her heart. And yes, she says like the myrrh or the perfume lying between my breasts is what she says in the scripture. But in this case, it's not even meant to be a sexual moment. It's meant to be that it's close to her heart because the myrrh was a costly fragrance that was associated with beauty and preparation and celebration. And basically back then when you knew it was going to be one of those times, that's something that you would adorn yourself with. The Hebrew word, more there, it means myrrh, very close. It has the whole idea of something that is precious and valuable. Remember what we were just talking about. Fragrance is very rare and very expensive in these days, but it has a presence that lingers. Then she goes on to compare him to a bouquet of sweet henna blossoms from the vineyards of En-Gedi. En-Gedi was an oasis that was near the Dead Sea, but it was known for beauty and gardens and water and life that was in the middle of an otherwise harsh landscape, surrounded by desert and dryness, and death was this little garden. It still is that way today, by the way. Why does that matter? Because healthy love often becomes a source of refreshment in difficult seasons. I'll tell you what, I know I'm kind of known for sarcasm when you get to know me, and I like to pick on the people that I love, but in the hardest seasons that I've had in my life, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have an oasis in my wife to be able to go to, where I felt safe and I could process things and talk through things. I'm so grateful. The two continue going back and forth with words of affirmation. It is an ancient version of no, you stop. No, you hang up first. How beautiful you are, my darling. You're so handsome, my love. But you see that it is mutual, right? It's not just, well, she's the one with the words. It's not really my thing. Make it your thing. Make it your thing. If it matters to her, make it part of your thing. We're all teachable, right? And so the way that I look at that is this. This relationship is not built on one person constantly giving while the other one only receives. Healthy love learns how to both express value and receive it. Express value and receive it. Side note, if you've never done it, I know a lot of churches, a lot of Christians have done it. It's not like a sure thing, but man, look up the 5 love languages. It's a great place to start if you're worried about how to communicate with one another. It's a good tool. The word that's translated as beautiful there comes from the Hebrew word yafeh, and that means pleasing, lovely, or delightful. Delightful. In Hebrew poetry, beauty was connected to more than appearance, and so this is the admiration of the whole person. And the repeated affirmations that are happening here in this section, they're showing that honor pays attention. Honor pays attention. It notices things and it speaks and it values being intentional instead of just assuming that people already know how loved they are. They didn't even have cell phones back then and they're already distracted. And I just told you how much I love my wife, but there's plenty of times that she's been talking to me about something and I feel in my heart of hearts that I can multitask it because there's a lot of things I can multitask. And there's been more than once where I've asked her to repeat something once or twice and then I go, I'm so sorry. Go ahead. Because when you have to repeat yourself over and over again, not only is it sort of annoying, it also communicates he's not really listening. He does not really care. I do though, just for the record. All right. Song of Songs reminds us that your words actually build environments within your relationships and within your home. Honor always creates security and encouragement strengthens your intimacy. Consistent affirmation will build a connection over time. And I have also had people say, well, I tried complimenting her and it hasn't worked. And I'll be like, well, we just met last week. So keep going. Don't quit. And I want you to know this. This applies not only to marriage or dating relationships, but it applies to friendships and to families and churches and it applies to the way that believers speak to one another overall. Healthy relationships flourish where honor is practiced on a regular basis. So your question's there, do my words consistently create life and honor and security in my relationships, or do they create distance or discouragement? And when is the last time that I intentionally expressed genuine appreciation to someone who matters a great deal to me? We're now at Song of Songs chapter 2, and we're only going to go over the first 7 verses tonight. But the first 6 are in this section. The last one gets its own section. This says, his banner over me. She says this, I am the spring crocus blooming on the Sharon plain. There's another one, guys. You're gonna say, you're like a spring crocus, girl. Crocus, sorry, not crocus. I don't know what that is. And listen, she says, the lily of the valley. You ever heard that in a song before? Lily of the valley? It's been in many a worship song. But the young man responds to her and says, like a lily among thistles is my darling among young women. So she says, I'm like the lily of the valley. And he says, yeah, lily among thistles. We'll get to that. She then says, like the finest apple tree in the orchard is my lover among other young men. And she says, I sit in his delightful shade. She says, I taste his delicious fruit. He escorts me to the banquet hall. It's obvious how much he loves me. Wouldn't it be great to know that your wife or your husband said to somebody else, like, it is obvious how much they love me. Strengthen me with raisin cakes and refresh me with apples, for I am weak with love. And it says here, his left arm is under my head and his right arm embraces me. Well, obviously this imagery becomes softer and slower and a little more intimate, doesn't it? This relationship is no longer focused on just attraction or the compliment war that they were going through. Now there's this growing sense of closeness and physical bonding that's happening, and love is beginning to feel less like excitement and more like rest. One of the most beautiful things when you're in a healthy relationship is how restful it can feel. There are times I do not feel like talking about my day. I don't feel like getting it out. I don't feel like venting. I don't feel like filling her in or anything. I just want to go and be at home and be around her. And that alone is helpful. The woman here starts by saying, I am the spring crocus blooming on the Sharon plain, the lily of the valley. And so again, at first glance, that sounds like an odd statement to describe yourself. It also sounds like a bold declaration of her beauty, because when I hear it through my 2026 filter of this ancient scripture that says lily of the valley, that sounds like a beautiful picture. Is that the way it sounds to you also? Well, it's actually more humble than people realize, because the flower she's describing referred to a common field flower instead of something that was rare or royal. In other words, she's not presenting herself as extraordinary or untouchable. She sees herself as ordinary or simple or easily overlooked. Easily overlooked. Think about all the times that the kids will run up to you and give you that yellow flower that they just picked out of your front yard. Look what I found for you. And you're like, thank you. My allergies have already noticed it. But the man responds, like a lily among thistles is my darling young woman. He takes what she sees as common and he speaks value over it there. So she's saying, I'm just a normal everyday flower. And he's like, well, if you are, then everybody else around you is a thistle. Now, if you want something serious, you can tell your woman that. I'm not interested in any of them. It's like I'm looking at a bunch of thistles. She'll love that, okay? What he sees her think as common, he speaks value over it. Thorns and thistles throughout Scripture always are associated with brokenness and hardship and the effects of sin entering the world. And here, in the middle of a broken world, he's saying, I see how beautiful you are and you stand out. One of the healthiest things that love can do is to help people see value in themselves when they struggle to recognize it on their own. That word translated as lily comes from the word Shushan. It's a flower associated with beauty and purity. Purity is your blank there, delicacy, or even life. All throughout Hebrew poetry, flowers would represent both beauty and fragility, because blossoms are beautiful, but they also require care and they don't last for long, do they? The woman responds with another comparison, saying, like the finest apple tree in the orchard is my lover among other young men. And that word, tapuach, it's translated as an apple tree, just literally as apple tree. But again, it's one of these areas that's a little more symbolic. Maybe not literally an apple tree, but it would be a fragrant fruit-bearing tree that was valued for 2 reasons, both for nourishment and for shade. For nourishment and for shade. In other words, she's saying, it's healthy for me to be around you, and it's restful for me to be around you. Attraction alone can't sustain closeness over time. Eventually, people begin looking for something more than excitement. They look for peace and emotional safety and trust. And one of the signs of a maturing love through two people is when someone's presence becomes restful instead of emotionally exhausting or draining. Then we arrive eventually at one of the most famous lines in the entire book, where it says, his banner over me is love. The Hebrew word translated banner is degel. Degel. It means a military standard or a flag that is carried visibly above a group of people. Banners represented identity and belonging and protection, and who someone was associated with publicly. If you walk down the street carrying the American flag, somebody knows what you stand for. And again, that's part of what makes this powerful. She's not describing any sort of hidden affection or a secret attachment. Love is being carried openly above her life like a banner that people can see. So there's security and confidence in this. And that stands in a direct contrast to relationships that are built in confusion or secrecy or emotional inconsistency. Healthy love does not constantly leave people questioning where they stand with you. It always communicates belonging clearly. Now, one thing I want to say before we move on to this last verse, and I know we're going a little long, it's the first night. There's another layer here that has caused this verse to be something that resonates so deeply with believers throughout the years. This is one of the moments through this song where a lot of people see this image not only as romantic love, but a reflection of the love that God has for his people. All throughout Scripture, God's love is not hidden, and he identifies his people openly, and he covers them and protects them. The Lord is my banner is one of the names for Jehovah. And so this is a great connection there. And the section closes with closeness and tenderness when he says, his left arm is under my head and his right arm embraces me. And I ain't trying to give y'all too much information here or whatever, but it is one of the best feelings in the world for both of us to have my arm under her head. And most wives say something along those lines. As a matter of fact, every so often I'll snuggle with my son or my daughter and they're like, oh, I feel so safe here. And she'll be like, yeah, great kid, but it was mine first. And you won't be here forever. It'll be mine again, right? So there's something safe about it. Let's go ahead and go on to the last verse. Do not awaken love too soon. So in verse 7, this is all it says. The woman says this, promise me, O women of Jerusalem, by the gazelles and wild deer, to not awaken love until the time is right. After all of the language here of attraction and they're admiring each other and they're intimate and all of this woman now pauses. They've been talking back and forth to each other, the man and the woman, and these other people are just in the background saying, yay, we love love and you guys are doing great. And she turns and she starts to speak to all the other women and she says, do not awaken love before the time is right. It's not a passing statement. This is one of the central themes throughout the entire book. You'll hear it again in future lessons. That phrase, awaken love, has the whole idea of stirring up or arousing or exciting or activating something before the time is right. That Hebrew word is ur. It's pronounced ur, and it means to stir up or incite or rouse from sleep. Would you picture like a sleeping giant, and you don't want to wake them up? Love is described almost like something that is sleeping peacefully until the proper moment arrives. The warning here is not that love is bad, it's just that love is powerful. And when you wake it up at the wrong time, it's not a good thing. That's an important distinction. I think a lot of people have only heard conversations about relationships that have been framed negatively before. Think about this. When they say, well, the old ball and chain, or they talk about her nagging, or sometimes we'll talk about mourning our singleness, or having no freedom once you get married. These are all things that speak negative things over a beautiful connection of marriage. And Song of Songs does not shame any sort of desire or attraction. It teaches that good things can become dangerous when they're forced outside of their proper timing. So that phrase, until the time is right, comes from a Hebrew word that is chafetz, and it means delight, desire, pleasure, or proper intention. Proper intention. In other words, this is not merely about waiting for a random moment. It's a little about love unfolding with the right purpose and the right maturity under the right conditions. And this is where wisdom becomes so important. Emotional maturity and trust and building a covenant with people are always built slowly. And so the reality that extends far beyond dating relationships here that I want to get across to you is this. People can awaken emotional dependency too quickly in friendships. Sometimes they can force trust before it's been earned. Sometimes we rush intimacy before stability exists underneath it. And in every area of life, wisdom understands that some things have to develop gradually or they're going to remain unhealthy at some point. This woman is given a warning to these other people, not because love should be feared, but because it should be respected. Think about it. Fire that's in a fireplace brings warmth and life, and we love to be there, but fire outside of its boundaries is destructive. And so the power itself that love has is not the problem. It's the lack of wisdom that becomes the problem.